September 3rd, 1783. After 8 long years of warfare, the fighting has finally come to an end, and the Americans have defeated the British. But the hardest battle is not yet over. A last-minute production presents From Articles to Constitution, Bold Strokes. While Britain's chokehold on America was finally released, many Americans wondered what the future would hold for them. Americans were not unified under one government, and with multiple philosophies between colonies, including the flawed philosophies of the South, there was no clear answer about how to proceed. Still dealing with the aftermath of the war, there was no question that action had to be taken. With a developing economy and a weakened military, the Americans had a lot of factors to consider after the war. Finally, the answer came with the Articles of Confederation, the first government of the United States. The Articles of Confederation were drafted by the delegates of the Second Continental Congress, but they could not be ratified until all 13 colonies agreed to them. These articles meant to emphasize state power by giving the states control of everything not specifically designated to the national government. The process of ratification stretched over a few years due to the fact that a number of colonies would have to cede western lands, but it was finally agreed upon on March 1st, 1781. Though written with good intentions, the Articles of Confederation failed to unite the states and produced less than satisfactory results.
After the American fried rice, they wrote the Articles of Confederation. Oh, I forgot! Fried rice sounds so similar to revolution in Chinese. Okay, that makes more sense. After the American Revolution, they wrote the Articles of Confederation, which tracked the checks and balances that we have today in the U.S. government. It had a unicameral legislature, and each state had one vote, and it took two-thirds majority to pass registration. And all the states had to be in agreement in order to amend article at all. There was no national executive branch or court system. That sounded like bad part of fried rice. The Gov had this power at the time the Articles of Confederation were created, so it could not correct tax, raise army, or regulate trade. This was a major weakness in system of government, which led to a massive debt. Furthermore, many states print their own money, making the national currency more worthless than firecracker shrimp. And to top it off, other countries began raising tariffs on U.S. goods, but the U.S. could not afford to do the same, leading in bigger financial losses. The lack of strong U.S. Navy made merchant ships especially vulnerable to pirates and fried rice. 谢谢.
One of the main reasons the Articles of Confederation were called back onto the table to be reformed was Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shays, a farmer, fought in several major battles of the Revolutionary War. He was wounded in action and resigned without receiving pay. After winding up in court because Daniel and others were not able to pay off their debts, they organized an armed revolt which drew lots of attention towards the state of the country. This rebellion helped confirm for the elites that the Articles of Confederation were not sufficient in governing the country and helped bring about the Constitutional Convention. The states were governed under the Articles of Confederation for 8 frustrating years, ending in March of 1789. The flaws in the document led to the states fighting amongst each other over their economies and also resulted in a useless, underfunded national government. Eventually, something had to be done. In 1787, a meeting was set to take place in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. This would later be known as the Constitutional Convention. From Articles to Constitution, Bold Strokes will be back after a brief message from our sponsor.
Tired of your wife not listening to you as a proper wife should? Tired of her ignoring your every command? Well, not anymore, with her personal wife trainer. Put your wife back in her place and reestablish your male dominance. Through lessons such as washing the dishes or sweeping the floor, Wife Trainer quickly trains your wife to act obediently. To order Wife Trainer, just mail 3 easy payments of $6.99 to Chastity Summers and watch your problems disappear.
The Constitutional Convention was a grand convention of all the states to discuss how to improve the Articles of Confederation. The convention was called in May 1787 and was held in Independence Hall, Philadelphia. Eventually, all states attended except for Rhode Island, although very few delegates selected actually showed up. The only state to have full representation at the first meeting was Virginia.
If it wasn't for James Madison's extensive notes on the Constitutional Convention, what happened in Independence Hall would be a mystery. As the event was secretive in nature, all the townspeople knew was that the blinds were always drawn and the windows frequently steamed up. Who knows what really went on in there?
Although all the representatives at the Constitutional Convention were men, women played the important role of bringing them sandwiches.
It's about time.
The first few months were primarily spent debating the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. The Virginia Plan was drafted by James Madison and presented on behalf of the Virginian delegates by Edmund Randolph. It set forth the idea of bicameral legislature and population-wave representation. The plan included a three-branch government in which there was a legislative, judicial, and executive branch. It also rallied to take control of all that states could not do, thus giving the national government more power than it had under the Articles of Confederation. The New Jersey Plan, also known as the Small State Plan, was proposed by William Paterson in the interests of states with lesser population in response to the Virginia Plan. The New Jersey Plan called for a unicameral legislature in which all states were granted equal representation regardless of size. It supported keeping national government to a minimum and recognizing states as separate entities, as they had been when they entered the country. The Virginia Plan was chosen to serve as the outline for the Constitution. However, aspects of the New Jersey Plan were also incorporated. The bicameral legislation was decided to have a House of Representatives with a delegation based on state population and a Senate, with equal representation from each of the states. The remainder of the convention was spent discussing issues such as elections, term lengths, impeachment, minimum ages for office holders, and slavery. The Constitution was officially signed on September 17, 1787, and sent out for ratification.
Well, the first three articles of the Constitution define the three branches of government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch was developed to basically write the laws for the country. It was split into two halves to better distribute the power. And as you may know, these halves were called the House of Representatives and the Senate. We call this split the Great Compromise, since both the larger and smaller states were equal in power, regardless of size. The executive branch established the offices of president and vice president, and among other things, allowed for the president to declare war. The role of the president was loosely defined in the Constitution, and many of the things that we now associate with the president were established through precedents by previous presidents. The judicial branch established the Supreme Court and defined the jurisdiction for all the courts. Its role was mainly to settle disputes between people by interpreting the law. An important role of the court was developed in the famous case of Marbury versus Madison, which established judicial review, a process which defines whether a law is constitutional or not.
Article 4 protected the rights of citizens in all states and also defined how new states were to be added to the United States of America. The 5th article explained how to amend the Constitution if necessary, and the 6th article defined the Constitution as the supreme law of the United States. The final article displays signatures of the members of the Constitution who agreed to all terms within the document. One of the main reasons the Articles of Confederation were called back onto the table to be reformed was Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shays, a farmer, fought in several major battles of the Revolutionary War. He was wounded in action and resigned without receiving pay. After winding up in court because Daniel and others were not able to pay off their debts, they organized an armed revolt, which drew lots of attention towards the state of the country. This rebellion helped confirm for the elites that the Articles of Confederation were not sufficient in governing the country and helped bring about the Constitutional Convention.
The three branches of government that the founders set up were surprisingly effective. The founders decided to ensure the success of the government by instituting checks and balances, or ways that one branch ensures the other branches do not have absolute power. Oh, thank you. Is that Eau Grey? It's marvellous. The idea of the three branches of government came from a French philosopher, Baron de Montesquieu, who first described this system during the Enlightenment. Could I get a crumpet? Of course, the only way a Frenchman could think of something so complex would be to take it directly from the Brits. However, his system had far more separation between the branches than the British model. Do you call this tea? Where's it from? A bag? And could I get a crumpet?
Girl, this is Alabama. We ain't got no crumpets.
Well, I never! Some of the checks and balances the founders roped into the Constitution are the legislative power to impeach, the executive power to veto, and the judges of the Supreme Court being appointed by President and serving for life. So that bit.
But writing the Constitution was not the final step. First, it had to be ratified by the colonies.
Following the signing of the Constitution, copies of the document were sent to all the states for ratification. 9 of the 13 states, roughly 3/4, were required to ratify the document for the Constitution to go into effect. The states were also responsible for informing the public good of the changes to the familiar Articles of Confederation. Newspapers, pamphlets, and public meetings were all used to debate the Constitution and influence the less educated. Those in opposition of the Constitution were called anti-federalists. Delaware was the first state to ratify, and New Hampshire was the 9th. Key states were Virginia and New York, who had locked in bitter debate. Eventually, though, all the states did ratify, though the anti-federalists got away with calling for a Bill of Rights to protect the rights of the American people under the new Constitution.
The struggle for ratification was not won easily. It was only after the implementation of the Federalist Papers that the attempts at ratification were finally successful.
James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay largely ended the debate over ratifying the Constitution by publishing a series of papers. These are known as the Federalist Papers. These authors addressed the multiple concerns the skeptic had towards the Constitution. One of Madison's most famous papers discussed the dangers of factions and the tyranny of the majority over the minority, along with the solutions the Constitution provided to these problems. While these papers were being published, all the authors went by the alias Publius, in honor of an ancient Roman consul. The influential writing of the Federalist Papers eventually persuaded the dissenters into agreeing to ratify the Constitution. Oh.
After the Constitution was ratified, the country quickly adapted to its new backbone. The Constitution struck a healthy balance between having a powerful national government and independent states. This document provided a strong foundation for government in the United States, but perhaps more importantly, the Constitution allowed for adaptation as the years passed. With an effective, albeit slow, amendment process, the Constitution was able to remain relevant and practical with the new challenges of each presidency. Many traditions centered around the branches of government that we are familiar with today also evolved with the Constitution instead of being directly included. Because the entire document was safely conservative, the few first presidencies of the United States helped develop more roles of the government, setting a precedence which is still followed over 200 years later. For example, the Judiciary Act of 1789 established the Supreme Court with 6 judges and broke up the states into multiple jurisdictions. Also, the judicial branch's new power of judicial review set an extremely important precedent for the rest of the country's history. The ability to classify a law as unconstitutional, although controversial, ensured the United States would remain safely bound to the Constitution which founded it. The executive branch also developed multiple small traditions, such as addressing the President as Mr. President instead of His Excellency. While seemingly a small gesture, this name change solidified the sense of democracy within the country, removing all traces of the monarchy the Americans had escaped years prior.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
the Declaration of Independence was signed, the United States was born, but the Articles of Confederation were what helped us take our first steps towards democracy after years of British tyranny. The United States first started with the loose government established by the Articles of Confederation. However, this was not enough to unite us. Called to action by events such as Shays' Rebellion, the Constitutional Convention was called to write the Constitution. With strong support from the Federalists, the Constitution beat the odds in the struggle for ratification, eventually convincing even the bitter anti-Federalist opposition. You know, it's really quite inspiring the progress the United States made in just a few short years. That is, except for the South, let's not go there. If it wasn't for the strong foundation which supported both freedom and patriotism, we wouldn't have the America we know today. Although one must admit that William Faulkner might never have been born, sparing the lives of innocent high school children everywhere across America. The country would have collapsed, and we would have gone back to Britain, if not for the creation of these documents. Thank you for watching From Articles to Constitution, Bold Strokes.
She broke it. It's broken.
How many years old is that?
I don't know.
Here we are with the ex-antique table. 2 legs have been broken off, right down the middle. Blake, show them the piece that you're holding right now. This is one of 5 that is broken off of this table.
Roughly 3/4, but not really 3/4 because 13 would mean that it would be like 8.5 for 3/4, or not really. I shouldn't pass 7th grade math. No, I'm just sweating like a pig on Sunday.